Yeah, welcome back. Um, Sorry, I lost my train of thought before it even began. Well, I hope that will not become too frequent. Okay, let's talk again about exercise cases concerning value-added tax. This one which follows now is not absolutely simple, but still probably based on simple thoughts, so let's call it a medium difficulty. It's similar to the case we had before. This is now again Albert from Aachen, and Albert is the proud owner still of a factory in Düren in the surroundings of Aachen, and he sells a production machine to the trader Theo in Tübingen, Germany for a price of 100,000 plus VAT. Now Theo in Tübingen turns the machine in sells the machine in turn already to his customer Karl in Chemnitz, Germany, for a price of 150,000. That happens very quickly, even before the machine ordered has been delivered, and so Theo, in order to save transportation costs and time, Theo asked Albert to send the machine directly to Karl in Chemnitz. So one transferred, two contracts. You can also have a variant of that case, again the same constellation, but in order to save time and transportation costs, customer Karl from Chemnitz asked Theo, where can I obtain the machine as quickly as possible? Theo says, well, it's not present in my farm, but I can give you the address of the producer, and if you show up there and say you come with my permission, and are allowed to take over the machine, then you can get it there and quickly transport it home. So that would be variant 2. Karl does the transport. Well, let's naturally begin to talk about the variant number 1. And this is exactly what we are going to do just now. So wait and see. Okay, let's begin to work on our case. You have probably noticed already that very often the most important thing is first to clarify the situation, so to make a sketch what happens. And this is what we are going to do here. We have Albert from Aachen. And Albert from Aachen does something for Theo in Thüringen. So this is Theo in Tübingen, sorry. Now, in turn, Theo does something has a contract with Karl in Chemnitz. So the most important first conclusion is we have two contracts. And so our situation is this is 1. And this is going to become number 2. Now, what happens in both situations is Albert delivers a machine for 100,000 and Theo sells the same machine for 150,000 plus V80, so net in both cases. And well, the last thing we need to find out now is perhaps, in order to have the sketch complete, from where to where is the machine transported. So this begins at Düren. Why? Because the machine was produced in Düren and stays there and is then going away from there. Now Albert has a contract made with Theo, and under the contract he is obliged to hand over the machine to Theo, and to do this at the place which Theo required it to happen. Theo said, don't send the machine to Tübingen. If you want to fulfill your contract with me, send the machine to a place at Chemnitz. So, under the contract with Theo, and in order to deliver his obligation, to fulfill his obligation to deliver the machine, to transfer ownership to Theo, he is obliged to transport the machine to Chemnitz. And there, when the machine arrives at Chemnitz, there Theo accepts the machine and ownership changes over to Theo. Now Theo is not in person at Chemnitz, but that doesn't hinder things to happen. Under civil law, you can nearly do everything by giving somebody the power of attorney to make that person an agent for you, a representative for you, or somebody who speaks in your name and your behalf. When it comes to just accepting things, you can nearly appoint everybody as your representative or agent. And so if Theo says Carl has the power, or Carl is appointed by me as the person who can accept in my name, as my, let's call it a deputy, as my deputy, then everything's fine. If Carl signs, I got the machine, then you delivered the machine to me, to Theo. So that is why the first contract is Albert sends the machine to Chemnitz, but that's the delivery from Albert to Theo, because Albert has only an obligation to Theo, and Albert carries the machine somewhere. This is why because he is obliged to Theo, and he sends the machine to the place which Theo demanded it to go to, hands it over to the person who is empowered to act for Theo, to accept the machine. So everything which happens here during the transfer is just the delivery of the machine to Theo. Now, there is a second contract where Theo is obliged to hand over ownership in the machine to Carl. And one thing is common sense. Theo can only hand over a machine after Theo, has got that machine. So as long as the delivery from Albert to Theo is not yet completed, Theo cannot hand over the machine to somebody else because he has not yet got it. When can Theo begin to hand over ownership in the machine to Carl? Well, only after he got it. At that moment, the machine is already at Chemnitz. Now, when the machine is at Chemnitz, how long does it take to hand over ownership to Carl? Well, only a fraction of a second, because at the moment when Theo completely has ownership in hands, the machine is already at Chemnitz, at the location where Carl has established his business. So the only thing which needs to happen is hop, ownership jumps over to Carl. That can now happen within a millisecond. And so that is why the second transaction happens at Chemnitz, and there the machine stays at Chemnitz. This is now what happens. And now, after we know what happens, we have again a relatively easy game. We just have to test through the testing scheme for transaction 1 and transaction 2. And this is what we are going to do now. So, event number 1, delivery from Albert to Theo. Movement of good is Düren to Chemnitz. Just to make that clear. Such a transaction, by the way, where one and the same good is sold twice. So we have two deliveries, ownership changes twice, but where only one transport exists directly from the first person in the chain to the last person in the chain is called a chain transaction. And the transport, as you have seen, belongs, or the transport is the fulfillment of contract number 1. That is what common sense told us. Albert carries out the transport. That is what we see here. Albert carries out the transport. And Albert only carries out the transport in order to fulfill his own contracts. Nobody drives through the world for the contracts of other people. You do your own business and you don't mind the business of others. This can even be confirmed if you take a look to German USDG, the V80 Act, because for such chain transactions, some people regard them as complicated. The legislator felt the need to confirm explicitly where the transport belongs to. So let's have a small look to that, and then we can go on. Indeed, here we have it, paragraph 3, section 6a or subsection 6a USDG. The rule for chain transactions, which only speaks about the problem to which of the transactions the movement of the good belongs. Here you can see if several entrepreneurs conclude delivery contracts concerning the same good, and this good is then directly transported from the first entrepreneur to the last customer in the chain, called chain transaction, then the transport of the good is attributed to only one delivery in the chain, as we saw it from common sense just a second ago. Now the different cases are discussed which can happen if the good is delivered, which is delivered is transported by the first person in the chain, and the transport is to be attributed to his delivery. As we already said just a second ago, that's clear because the person who delivers the good, or better, the person who makes the transport, does not care about obligations of other persons. That person just fulfills his or her own obligation, and that is why if Albert drives somewhere and transports the good to another location, this is because Albert has a contract with his own customer, and Albert wants to fulfill his own contract with his customer, so it's clear it's Albert's contract where the transport belongs to. That's enough for this variant, so let's keep that in mind. Paragraph 3, 6a, sentence 2 says, yes, we are right with attributing the transport of the good to Albert's contract. That is something which some people would like to see in written words, so we make a note of it and then go on. So, as we said, paragraph 3, 6a, sentence 2, that is the proof that transport belongs to the first contract, so to this transaction which we have here. Then, after having that cleared, test paragraph 1.1, number 1 for taxability. You remember, or I hope you perhaps remember already, all the 5 necessary criteria. That was, do we have a delivery made by an entrepreneur? Yes, Albert is an entrepreneur. He's a factory owner. Paragraph 2.1, sentences 1 and 3 will teach us, yes, if you own a factory, then you are an entrepreneur. Does he act within the range of his enterprise activities? And the answer is yes. Owner of machine production, produces a machine. That's core business of a machine. Factory owner. 2.1, sentence 2. And to remind you, it would even be covered by the range of his enterprise if it had only a loose connection to the enterprise activity, so if it were some occasional buy effect. For consideration, And that's clear, yes, he demands a price. So the next question is it a delivery of a good? And here, yes, paragraph 3.1 USDG. A machine is a tangible good, and selling is transfer of position like an owner. So yes. Is it in the inland? For this we need place of delivery. You remember there are two basic rules in German law, paragraph 3.6 if the good is moved, or 3.7 if the good is not moved during the contract, and this is moved. So where the transfer of the good towards the customer begins, and this is here Düren, and this is in the inland. If you want a citation for that, that's paragraph 1, subsection 2, which tells you exactly that. So we have a nice conclusion to offer. It's taxable in Germany. Good. Now the question of an exemption, and the answer is simple. Paragraph 4 does not apply. Look it through before you say things like that. I just simplify my life by not doing a thorough inspection of the whole text of these 5 or 6 or 8 pages of paragraph 4, but you should from time to time do it to be aware which things could be exempt. But here it's clear it's liable to tax. So we have now the tax base defined. Paragraph 10.1, sentence 102. It's the net amount, and this is here given as 100,000 euros, so no problem. Tax rate and amount are naturally, in all probability, 19% due to paragraph 12.1, because 12.2 does not apply. So we have 19,000 euro tax in play. And that's it. Now let's turn to the formalities. Taxpayer is Albert, because he is in that transaction here the entrepreneur. The arisal of the tax is at the end of that preliminary declaration period during which the delivery was made. That's in paragraph 13, and here no date is given. My case was not very perfect. Invoicing and declaration duties, as usual, nothing special. No peculiarities like wrong invoicing or other things or other mistakes or other peculiar aspects which always had to be tested outside the testing scheme, so nothing which is so irregular that we need an extra command. Input tax refund claims, well, Albert could and can claim input tax refund for his raw material, etc., used for the production of the machine, and for the transportation cost, naturally. For the V80 transportation cost. Okay, that's event number 1. Now let's look to event number 2. That's now Theo to Carl. Let's again test the taxability. Paragraph 1.1, number 1 USDG. Do we have an entrepreneur who acts? Yes, the entrepreneur is Theo. He makes a delivery, and that's 2.1, sentence 1 and 3. And if you look there, you see that a trader is an entrepreneur. Within the enterprise activities, is it included or is it his private life? 2.1, sentence 2 clearly says, okay, that's a yes. Trading a machine by machine trader. This is clearly covered. For consideration, yes, on the price. Do we have a delivery? And the answer is the machine is a good, tangible good, and selling is transfer of position like an owner. So clearly a yes. The place of supply or the place of the delivery. Now look to the second sketch. Do we have a delivery where the good needs to be moved from one point to another? The answer is here, no, we don't have such a case. We have a case of hopping over of ownership to a new owner without that the machine needs to be moved, because it is already at the end of the first transaction at the place where it needs to be in the future. So where the machine is at the moment when ownership changes. And that is Chemnitz, and that's in Germany. So we have a taxable transaction in Germany under number one. If you want to repeat that, that is not negative. So now let's shortly look for the rest. So tax exemption does not apply, so the affair is liable to tax. We have a tax base of 150,000, that's the net amount. We have tax rate and tax amount, that's 19%, because 12.2 does not apply, so we have 28,500. The taxpayer is Theo because he is the entrepreneur who makes the delivery here, 13A number 1. The arisal of the tax is again at the end of that preliminary declaration period during which the delivery happened. Here no date is given due to my laziness when I designed that case. Then invoicing and declaration duties, nothing special. No extraordinary things which would require a comment outside the usual testing scheme. Then we can still think about input tax claims, and you can claim input tax for the purchase of the machine. So what he had as VAT contained in the purchase price, and Carl could claim input tax refund of 28,500 for the complete VAT contained in or paid on the purchase price if he uses the machine for his own enterprise. So that's it. Variant 1 has been sufficiently tested and solved. Now you will have, in all probability, clear expectations what is going to come after variant 1, and indeed you are right. After variant 1, we should have a look on variant 2. So let's again start with the sketch. What happens here? We have again a contract between Albert from Aachen, who has his factory in Düren, and Theo from Tübingen. So this is contract number 1. So this will be delivery number 1 later. Now we also have a second contract again, Theo from Tübingen, and Theo makes a delivery to Karl from Chemnitz. This will be contract or transaction number 2. They both have to be evaluated separately. That is something which you already know. What happens in the case of contract number 1? Albert delivers a machine, and he does that for 100,000 plus VAT, or 100,000 net. And a bit later, the same machine is delivered from Theo to Carl for a price of 150,000 net. And there is only one transport. We need now to find out what happens here. When Carl goes to Düren in order to look for the machine, then what now plays a role is that Carl, let's mark him as the guy who makes a transport. Now, if Carl goes to Düren, the only motive which Carl can have reasonably is not to fulfill contract number one, but to go to Düren and to obtain at Düren the good which Carl, wants to buy from Theo, and to bring home that good which he bought from Theo to the place where he needs it to, where he needs it to be. So if you go to that sequence of contracts with common sense, then you see directly when Carl goes to Düren, this is just only the execution of his own contract. Theo told him, you can go and receive your machine which you ordered from me at Düren. If you go there, knock on the door, tell the guy beyond the door, hey, Theo from Tübingen sends me, you are meant to hand over the machine to me. And they look it up, find, okay, that's correct. Theo announced that Carl is going to come, so they do it. And so Carl just takes care of his own purchase. He drives to the place where he can get his own good and then drives home. Now logic says when he knocks on the door at Düren, then already Theo obligation to hand over the machine. Now Theo can only hand over a machine if Theo got it before. So transaction 1 must have happened before. At the end of transaction 1, the machine has evidently still been in Düren. It was in Düren at the beginning. So here we see during the first transaction, Albert hands over the ownership in the machine from Albert to Theo. During that first transaction, evidently the machine had stayed at Düren, and so the first transaction happened in Düren without any movement of the good. Now, if we know that, we can make some notes. First, this is a chain transaction. The same good is sold several times, but only transported once from the first within the chain to the last within the chain. Now, the movement of the good or transport belongs to transaction number 2 here, because Carl does the transport, and Carl only does transports because of his own contracts. This can be found again or confirmed in that famous section, paragraph 3, section 6a. And this will now be sentence 3. Let's have a look in order to confirm that. And indeed, here it is. If you look to sentence 3, if the good which is delivered is transported by the last customer, so the last person in the chain at all, then the transport has to be attributed to the delivery which is made to him. which is totally common sense. As we already said, Carl only drives to another place because one announced him. There you can receive the good which you want to buy. So this is just Carl executing his own order or fulfilling the purchase which he wants to make. Okay, so after we know what we know, we can now say event number 1, transaction Albert to Theo is now taxability again. We need to test paragraph 1, number 1 USDG, and this is an entrepreneur. Is it within the enterprise? Is it for consideration? We leave that out because it's the same as before. Nothing happens. Is it delivery of a good? And the answer is yes. Machine is a good, and selling is transfer of position like an owner. Paragraph 3.1 USDG is fulfilled. This is a delivery. The place of delivery is now paragraph 3.7, sentence 1 USDG, where the good is at the moment when ownership changes. This is here according to the case data Düren, that is in the inland. So transaction is taxable under paragraph 1, number 1. Now the whole rest will be the same because here no decisive thing changes. That will be as before. By the way, in an exam you would never react this way, but I think hearing the same things twice on a video is not so attractive. Now, event number 2, that's Theo to Carl. Here we have again taxability to test. This is paragraph 1, number 1 USDG. And we also ask the same simple questions. Is it an entrepreneur? Yes, Theo is one within his enterprise. Yes, as above. Does he act for consideration? Yes, as above. Do we have to deal with a delivery? And the answer is yes. Paragraph 3.1. It's a machine, and the machine is a good, and so on. The place is here according to paragraph 3.6, sentence 1, where the transport of the good towards the customer begins. That is here in Düren, in contrast to the previous variant. So that's in the inland, so the whole thing is taxable, and the rest is unchanged as before. In this particular example, in other examples, differences might be possible. So in a real exam or in a realistic case in the real world, you would always test every element from the beginning to the end and would not leave out any steps. I do this here just for simplification, that you don't get the feeling that in the videos you always hear the same stuff or everything twice. Okay, that is enough for this small case here. Thank you for listening. Try to compare your own solution with the one which you found here. Be happy if you made mistakes, because then you made the mistakes now and they help you in understanding how it is to be done correctly. Or if you didn't make mistakes, be even more happier. Whatever you can, try to be happy, because happiness is better than sadness. And before I talk more rubbish to you, I should now close this small little lecture and say goodbye till the next one. Have a good day and goodbye.